everyone. Good day, everyone. So today, I'm going to talk with you about defining grammatical ability in language testing. So in this presentation, we'll explore how our understanding and testing of grammar have evolved over time. So from just checking if a sentence is structured correctly to looking at whether it actually makes sense when we use it. So I'll share some examples along the way, and by the end, I hope you see why both form and meaning are so important in language learning. Let's start with the big question: how we decide if someone has a good grasp of grammar. So in the past, tests only looked at whether the sentence was built correctly, like checking if you said she goes to school instead of she go to school. But nowadays, we also care about whether the sentence conveys the right meaning. Think about when you speak informally sometimes. Even if the grammar isn't perfect, the listener still understands you. Today, I'll show you why this matters in language testing. Back in the 1960s and 1970s, language tests were all about structure. Researchers like Lado and Carroll believed that if you could get the sentence form right, you were on the right track. So for example, you might have been asked to correct a sentence like, she go to school. The focus was solely on correcting the verb tense and word order. So there was a little thought about whether the sentence made sense in a real conversation. In this early test, it was all about the rules. A sentence like she go to school would be marked wrong simply because the verb form was off. Even if you meant to say the correct thing, the test didn't care about your intended meaning, only about whether the structure was perfect. Imagine if your teacher only cared about the red ink on your paper, not the ideas you were trying to express. Then, in the 1980s, everything started to change. Researchers like Cannell and Swain introduced the idea of communicative competence. So instead of just fixing errors, language testing began to value how well you could use language to communicate. Tests started to look at pronunciation, vocabulary, and meaning, not just grammar rules. Now, you might be asked to describe your day or explain a picture, tasks that show you can use language in real life. Let's talk about discourse level grammar. Instead of looking at single sentence in isolation, modern assessments check how you connect your ideas. So for example, compare these two ways of saying the same thing. So the first one is, she has a cat. The cat is white versus she has a white cat. The second version is smoother and more natural because it shows how we link ideas together. This is the kind of language we use in real conversation. Now, here's an interesting challenge. Sometimes a sentence might be grammatically incorrect but still get its message across. Take the example, I know, understand. It isn't the standard form we'd say, I don't understand, but we all know what it means. So, should we mark such sentence as completely wrong? So, this slide raises that question and shows why meaning is just as important as form. So consider this. Sometimes a student might use the correct form of a sentence, yet the meaning is off. For example, someone might say my boss is boring when they really meant my boss is bored. The grammar might seem fine, but the wrong word completely changes the meaning. This kind of error is tricky because it shows a gap in understanding not of how to form a sentence, but of what the sentence is supposed to mean. Even more interesting is when a sentence is technically correct, but it doesn't sound right in context. Think of the sentence, the cell phone dropped from me. While the structure might follow some rules, it's awkward and doesn't match everyday speech. We would naturally say, I dropped my cell phone. This example shows that grammar isn't just about following rules. It's about making sure our language feels natural and conveys our intended message clearly. Back in 1987, Bachman and Clark challenged us to rethink our language proficiency models. They argued that our test should capture both grammatical form and the meaning of what we say. In other words, it isn't enough to just get the structure right if the intended meaning is lost. They pushed for models that recognize the complexities of language, even when form and meaning sometimes overlap. Let's look at a specific example. The model auxiliary must. It's a simple word in form, but it can be used in different ways. For instance, you must finish your homework. So it shows obligation. The second one is it must be true. It suggests a logical conclusion. So learners might easily remember the word must but get confused about when to use it for obligation versus probability. This illustrates that even simple words can have complex meanings and our test should reflect that. Here's another challenge. How do we clearly distinguish between form and meaning in our test? So if a student writes, I know, understand, do we mark it wrong entirely or give some credit because the meaning is clear? This is a real dilemma for teachers and test designers, and it shows that our assessment models need to evolve to better capture both aspects of language. Because of these challenges, new and innovative testing approaches are emerging. For example, instead of just having multiple choice questions, some tests now include tasks where you explain your answer or use grammar in a more natural context. Imagine being shown a picture and asked to describe what's happening, not just to pick the correct sentence from a list. Such tasks help assess both your accuracy and your ability to communicate effectively. To really understand how learners use grammar, researchers have collected large bodies of student work. These are called learner corpora. By studying these texts, we can see common mistakes and patterns in errors. For instance, research on Korean ESL students has shown specific areas where passive voice is misused. This research informs us about persistent problems and guides us in developing better teaching methods and tests. Let's look at an example of a common mistake. The color of her face was changed. This sentence might show that a student understands how to form the passive voice, but they're not using it correctly in context. Such errors tell us that even when students know the rules, they sometimes struggle to apply them in the right way. This insight helps us understand where students need more guidance. In research, we often tag or label errors to see where learners are having trouble. Traditionally, most of this tagging focused only on form like verb tense errors. However, if we also tag errors related to meaning, we get a much richer picture of what students are struggling with. For example, if a passive voice error is due to a misunderstanding of meaning rather than a structural mistake, we can address that directly in instruction. Understanding the difference between form and meaning is not just academic. It has a real effect on teaching. When teachers know whether a mistake is about structure or about meaning, they can give more targeted feedback. For instance, if many students say, I don't understand, the teacher might focus on explaining how to form negatives properly while also showing that the meaning still comes true. This kind of focused feedback can greatly improve learning outcomes. Today, we also have powerful tools like AI and computer-assisted assessment that help us analyze language errors quickly. These tools can scan student work and flag mistakes. However, while they are great at catching errors in form, they sometimes miss issues related to meaning. That's why it's important to combine technology with human insight to truly understand and address a learner's needs. So, to wrap up, our approach to grammar testing has come a long way. We've moved from a narrow focus on sentence structure to a broader view that considers how well a sentence communicates meaning. Both form and meaning are essential part of language, and our tests need to assess them together. This evolution in testing help us support learners more effectively, ensuring they not only follow the rules but also communicate clearly. So, that's all for my part. Thank you.